TikTakers, we often talk on the channel about the bloodiest killers. We know you like to know about his life and his misdeeds, but to date, we hadn't talked about anyone who planned his death as if it were a murder. Today, we want to talk to you about the strange death of James Moon. At 37, he was a merchant who lived on a farm with his wife and 6 children. He often traveled to the town of Lafayette, Indiana, United States. It was close to him and he could solve business matters. He used to stay at the Lar House Hotel, a place famous for being the first hotel in the area. Since he went often, the employees knew him well. That's why his case became so well known. Like other times, on June 10, 1876, Moon checked into the lodge to spend a few days in the area. In addition to being a merchant, he had a reputation as an inventor. Therefore, when he arrived with a large trunk, no one was surprised. They thought that surely it was a new job. At the front desk, he politely asked a clerk to assign him a quiet, secluded room. He said he wanted to rest, and he couldn't if there was noise. The clerk offered him several rooms, and he finally settled on one on the 3rd floor. It was located at the back of the hotel. After settling in and leaving all his belongings in the room, James headed out on errands around town. Going downstairs, he ran into a hotel employee with whom he trusted. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to tell him that he was working on a very important new patent. Leaving him intrigued, he went outside and headed to a nearby hardware store. There, he bought a heavy axe head. Then he went to a foundry and asked for 2 very thick iron plates. In addition, he gave them clear instructions to drill holes in the axe head and the iron plates. He said he was working on a fruit slicer. There, they told him that it would take them a long time to complete the order. So, Moon took the opportunity to go to a barber shop and shave. Then he went to a pharmacy and bought cotton and chloroform. Everything was normal, and of course, no one could suspect everything that would come later. He returned to the foundry with his trunk pulled by a cart. He loaded everything into it and went out. He had several companions in the city, men with whom he had shared ranks during the Civil War, so he took the opportunity to stop by to greet them. It was something he used to do when he was in the city. After completing the tour, he returned to the hotel. The trunk he was carrying was loaded, so it was impossible for him to carry it to the 3rd floor. He asked the hotel staff for help, who without hesitation carried the trunk. They were over 90 kilograms in weight, so Moon didn't hesitate to give them a big tip. Once in his room, and with everything he needed, he locked the door and went to work. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. On Sunday, June 11th, a woman who was in charge of cleaning the rooms knocked on his door several times, but she didn't receive any kind of response. She thought the man would be sleeping, so she decided not to disturb him. In the afternoon, she returned, and the same story repeated itself. It was very rare for Moon to be gone for so long, and no one had seen him leave. Therefore, she decided to ask for a skeleton key. Thus, she managed to enter the room. There was a totally terrifying spectacle. In fact, her screams alerted the hotel staff and guests, who immediately arrived at the scene. Inside was the body of James Moon, decapitated. What he had described as a fruit slicer was actually a guillotine. He tested his invention on his own head, something totally macabre. Immediately, the hotel staff notified the police, who determined that the man had built a perfect guillotine. He had thought of all the steps. It was an axe attached to a jointed wooden arm that pivoted on a hinge bolted to the ground. At the head of the axe were 2 wooden bars that acted as counterweights, and he used a soapbox to make sure he kept his head steady. The final step was to tie a rope to the windowsill and place a candle there, which would give him enough time to get settled before breaking the rope. Everything was measured. When they found him, Moon had already been dead for 10 hours, and no one knows why he turned his invention into the end of his life. It was scary, TikTakers.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.